Here are 3 things you need to know about getting startup funding for your nonprofit. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. So I help people start their nonprofits and raise money from the ground up. And I just provide insight on the startup process in general because I have been exactly in your shoes. And today I want to talk about startup funding because I get that question a lot about, well, how do you raise startup funds and how do you get to the point where you're no longer financing your nonprofit from your own check, right? You want to get funding from other sources so you can launch. So I want to share 3 things that you need to understand in order for you to be able to secure the startup funding that you need for your organization. Now, if you need help with fundraising, then make sure you join my Activate Your Purpose and Profit membership society. It's all focused on developing nonprofit founders so they are positioned and prepared to get the money they need for their nonprofit to grow. If you want to join that society, just comment join below and I'll send you the link. Here's the first thing you have to understand in your quest for startup funding. It takes time. And as cliche as it sounds, it really is the truth. If you're coming into the nonprofit space and you're thinking 6 months in, you're going to get all the money you need to be successful, then I need you to really temper your expectations. Most people that I work with don't really get significant funds in the very beginning unless they have a lot of networks, a lot of connections, or they just put in that work, right? So I think sometimes people come into the startup space because there's so much news about, supporting startups and supporting entrepreneurship. And so they equate that with nonprofits. So you hear about all these grant opportunities and you think that there's just a wealth of resources just waiting for you at your doorstep when you start. And so you just expect that. And so you don't necessarily think you have to work for it very much because you think it should just come. You just think there's a fund out there where they just giving out money to startups. And in the nonprofit space, that's just not the reality. And I really need you to understand that I'm not trying to discourage you. I need you to understand that I'm trying to make this process realistic for you so that you stay in the game. Because if you come into this with unrealistic expectations, then you're going to have some major letdowns. And those major letdowns can completely stop you in your tracks. So why not start from the beginning, knowing what to expect so that you can have longevity? Because it takes longevity to be able to make it, right? So I do want to explain though that if you work really hard at messaging your nonprofit, at making key connections, at, securing those startup funds, whether it's through finding donors, whether it's through getting grants, that you will get the funding that you need, right? There are ways you can get startup funding, but for people to get to their goals, like they want to work for their nonprofit full time, it just takes time. And this is the other thing, the process isn't always linear. So you may be thinking, well, if I do these things that Tiffany tells me to do, then 3 months from now, I should be good. But you may be sitting a year from now like, okay, I'm putting stuff in and I'm incrementally growing and I'm getting there little by little, but this ain't enough. That's because it really does take time. Remember what you're doing. You're literally starting an organization from scratch. So the expectations that you have for yourself when you're comparing yourself to an organization that's already established, that has a history of getting money in the past, they have donors, they have supporters already built in, though you can't have those same expectations, but you can build. And if you continue to build, you will have a strong foundation so that you will be sustainable. But just out the gate, just thinking that the money's just going to come at your feet, it's just the wrong way to think about it. So what I want you to do is just understand that it's going to take time to get to your money goals. And that's not a bad thing. And that's not a poor reflection on what you're doing. What you need to do is make sure you're taking the same consistent steps to making money. And I'm going to share a little bit more in this video about those kind of things that you need to be doing. And I've done videos on this before, so I'm linking one above to help give you strategies on how to get startup funding. Here's the second thing you need to know about startup funding. In order to make the money you need to launch your organization, you have to meet new people. And this is especially for those founders who don't want to meet new people, who are shy, who are saying they're introverted, who don't like networking. I know exactly who you are. And you're like, well, can't I just write a grant? And then by writing the grant, I get the money that I need. You could possibly write a grant, but the chances of you getting that and you getting all the money you need to launch, the chances are really slim. So the way that you make money, the way that you get startup funding is by introducing your organization to new people. And the more you introduce your organization to new people, the more opportunities present themselves for somebody to fall in love with your mission and support you. right? So just think about your current network. You have a current network of friends, family, associates, coworkers, social connections, right? And it's limited in terms of they're just people who you've ever interacted with, right? And if you need startup funding, then you lean on your network. You lean on who you know and what you know. But at some point, that stops because you can only lean on and depend on the people you know, but for so long. At some point, you have to expand that network so that more people hear about your organization and more people have the opportunity to give. One thing you need to understand about raising money, especially from the beginning, the first step is your visibility. The first step is being visible and building your credibility, because people are not just going to give to a random idea that they've never heard about or a random organization that's completely new that they don't have any kind of interaction or understanding about what they do. So part of your job in raising startup funding is educating people and building awareness about your organization first. So when you meet new people, part of the process is to educate them so that they can decide whether they want to support you and then spread the word. So the more people who know about your organization, the more opportunities come for them to give. And there's no magic formula to this. I'm not going to say to you, okay, if you talk to these 10 people in your life, then guaranteed you're going to get this money. But what I will say to you is the more opportunities you develop to educate people about what you're doing, and if you reach out to certain types of people over and over and over again, that's going to build your credibility, and eventually somebody's going to want to fund you. That's just how it is. But it really does depend on who you target, how you reach those people, and the message you're giving to those people. Because people need to learn more about you and learn why it should matter, learn why they should pay attention to what you're doing before they give. So I went around the mulberry bush just to say that if you're only relying on the people you know to make money, then you're only going to grow so far. At some point, you have to start meeting with people who you believe will be excited about your mission, meeting with your local legislators, meeting with the local media, meeting with local government officials, meeting with people who serve on other boards, meeting with church officials, meeting with whoever would care about what you're doing. And if you stay in your box, then your funding will stay in the box. So push yourself and challenge yourself to meet new people. The third thing I'll say is do not stick to one way. The mistake I see a lot of people making is around grants, because there's this story floating around. I don't know who started it and where it came from, but there's this just idea floating out there is that there's these magical grants that are going to help launch all these organizations, and once you get the grant, you're good, and you just keep getting grants over and over again. But if you look at the data about where nonprofits get their money, a lot of nonprofits get their money actually from individuals. It is not from grants. Though grants can be a sustainable source in certain ways for certain kinds of organizations, that's not true across the board. So one of the mistakes that people make is thinking that, okay, I'll rely on this funding source to get me through, and then I'll be good. I don't have to worry about anything else. I can just do my work. The thing about fundraising is that you have to stay ahead of the curve. You have to pay attention to what's happening in the market, because you have to know what your donors and funders are experiencing and what may be impacting their choice to give to you. Now, there are so many different things that can impact how and how much people give that you have to stay ahead of. Because if you only rely on one source and something happens to impact that source of funding, then you're out of luck. I've used this example before, but organizations that relied solely on or heavily on like golf fundraisers or event fundraisers were out of luck when COVID hit, because people couldn't be in the same room and they couldn't be in person with folks. So if that was the only way that they made money, and they only relied on that, people were severely impacted by that work, and some organizations had to actually close, right? So part of this is think about multiple ways and stack how you make money, right? Because there's different types of money that's going to support different types of activities. So your grants are going to be heavily focused on supporting your programming. Your individual donors or major donors or earned income strategies are going to support the the work you need to do to operate. They're going to support your overhead and your admin significantly. So you need to make sure you have a mixture of all of that so that a piece of your organization isn't too disturbed if something happens with an income source. So you need to think about what are the multiple ways I need to make money and how can I stack that so that it makes sense for our organization. This is why I'm saying it takes time, because it takes time to build different fundraising streams. You can't out the gate be like, I'm doing 3 different types of fundraising, especially when you don't have staff and you as the founder is doing everything. So that's another reason why I'm saying it takes time, because you got to build multiple ways to make money. Okay, maybe you're starting with the smaller local grants and they're getting you $2,000 and $5,000 a pop. But then maybe you need to get more unrestricted funding. So you launch a peer-to-peer campaign and you're getting monthly donors to that campaign and you're getting 20 people to give $20 a month. That's a start. But then you have to build from there and understand what are the additional ways you can build that up to get to your budget. Am I making sense? The other piece I kind of touched on with the COVID example is that you got to know when to pivot. You have to pay attention to what's coming down the pike. So in that situation where people couldn't be in person, a lot of people flipped to virtual and they had to do it in a short amount of time. So this is why it's important for you to plan and strategize, not just randomly pop up with a campaign or event. You should know before the year even starts what you're doing for the entire year. So that's why planning is so important. And when you plan, then you can see how to stack your money. You can see how to build together and weave together the different funding sources to get where you need to go. So the bottom line is, it takes time to build startup funding. It is absolutely possible, but it just takes a lot of work and dedication and tenacity to get there. I don't want you to give up if you feel like you're stopping and you're starting. You get one good grant and then that grant runs out. Then what, right? It's kind of like a stop and start process when you're starting your organization. But think about strategy overall. Don't think about just the here and now. Think about 3 years from now, 5 years from now, because it may realistically take that long to get to where you want to go in terms of making enough money, especially if you want to take a salary and things like that. All right. Again, if you need help, make sure you join my Purpose and Profit Society, because you need to hear from other people who are experiencing this so you can have more realistic expectations for yourself and for your nonprofit. If you need help, you can always visit me at bossonabudget.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.